Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Emma.
I'm Zara.
A new TV show has started a conversation about diversity in media and the representation of autistic people in Australian workplaces. The Assembly on ABC features a collective of autistic journalism students mentored by ABC veteran journalist Leigh Sales. Over 6 episodes, we see the students interview some of Australia's biggest names, from Hamish Blake to the Prime Minister. This feel-good series has not only entertained audiences, it started a broader discussion around representation, highlighting the strengths of neurodiversity in a way you might not have seen on screen before. To talk us through the Assembly and its broader impact, we're very excited to be joined by Leigh Sales herself in today's deep dive. Leigh Sales, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're talking today, of course, about The Assembly, a show that brings together a group of autistic people who are interested in pursuing journalism. But for anyone listening who might not have seen the program, how would you describe it in your words?
Okay, it's 15 autistic people who are given some training in the basics of journalism, and then I worked with them as a mentor. Then they every week are told that they're going to be interviewing a celebrity or a sports person or some other notable Australian. I work with them to help them craft the questions, and then as a group they interview that one person.
What was that mentoring process like for you? Had you ever done anything like that before?
I actually, after I finished anchoring 7:30, one of the things I asked the ABC was to try to do a job that carved out more time for me to work with other reporters and younger reporters to pass on some knowledge and skills. I really love doing that. So that's actually part of my job description to do that. So I do that quite a lot around the place in the ABC. And then so that side of it wasn't new to me. What was new to me was dealing with all the different kinds of people who, because autism is such a wide variety of presentation, so everyone's kind of different. So dealing with all these people to try to assist them to find what they wanted to ask and to also just give them the confidence to do it, because it's a big thing to have to stand up in front of everyone and ask questions of the Prime Minister or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you kind of developed that trust and you helped those journalists feel safe. Obviously, a diverse range of comfort and experience levels and skills. There's this disclaimer that one of the students leads at the start of each interview that I really loved, where, they kind of establish that this is a safe space, that, the talent are in a safe space, there are no questions off the table. How did you navigate helping them feel safe and confident and trusted?
So I think there were a couple of layers to it. One of the really important ones was that the producers of the show, which was a production company called Helium in conjunction with the ABC, worked very closely with a group called Aspect, which is an autism body that to kind of create a space that people would feel comfortable with and to use them as consultants for advice about how to create a space that's ticking all the boxes you need for television in terms of lights and equipment and the whole rigmarole, but to also make it autism friendly. So that was the first thing. So we had a couple of people from Aspect, Tom and Emma, who were always on set, who worked with everyone all the time. And so before I would even get involved, there was already a level, I guess, of comfort and familiarity and people being made to feel like we're here to make you feel like, this is okay. And so some of that work was done for me before I got there. But then also for me, I think it's the same thing that makes anyone comfortable in an interview, which is just listening really carefully to them and making it about them and not about you. So I would always try to be, paying attention and getting to know everyone and making them feel like I was interested in them and cared about them, which I did. And I think that people just sense that if you're genuine about that, and that enables people to feel kind of relaxed. And even, in my job, when I'm interviewing people, I'm all the time trying to give people that sense that they're in a kind of safe place.
Yeah. Similarly for the talent, was there a bit of navigating their concerns or their insecurities about what they were walking into?
Definitely so, because I think for the talent, the show had never been on before, so they didn't really have anything to compare it to or to know what to expect. And so you can imagine the pitch, you ring the Prime Minister and go, okay, we've got 15 autistic people. They're all going to interview you at once. They can ask whatever they like. It'll go for an hour and a half. And once we get going, I'll have limited control over the situation. It's not the most appealing.
What could possibly go wrong for a politician?
Exactly. So I think, for everyone who agreed to be in it, I so appreciated it because there was a bit of trust involved that it's going to be okay. And I thought that was just really wonderful that they were all willing to kind of give it a go. So that was lovely.
A lot of the students involved, we hear a bit about their personal lives, and many of them have experienced bullying, loneliness, isolation. What was the significance of giving those people access to some of the most influential names in the country, not only sitting them in the same room, but giving them their time?
It was so lovely to be around it because the group of students would always be so thrilled and excited about whoever was coming in. And so that was just so nice because, I've been a journalist for 30 years. And so when the Prime Minister's coming in, I tend to just feel nervous and worried and anxious and pressure. Whereas for this group, they'd be like, oh my God, I am going to be talking to the Prime Minister, right? So it just reminded you what a privilege that is that we get to do that in journalism all the time. And it was just such a kind of positive environment to be around because the other thing too was the nature of the questions and the way they were asked. There was never really an agenda. It was just whatever they were interested in or curious about. And so that also was a different kind of vibe to what media interviews or press conferences can be like. So it was just lovely being around it.
Yeah, it was that kind of lack of agenda that I noticed really put the interview subjects at ease in a way I hadn't seen before. We've all seen Anthony Albanese interviewed 100 times. You've interviewed him 100 times, but the kind of relaxed nature of it being a really pure sort of space.
100%. And you see that from the way the questions are asked, like just the genuine sort of interest. The other thing, other than the fact that things were asked without any kind of apparent agenda, was every question, whether it was a really serious one like what are you doing to help people with disabilities get employment, or how many times have you kissed Jodie? Everything was asked with the same level of emotional intensity. And so it's a really, I think, interesting experience for the person being interviewed because it's this wildly veering roller coaster that you're never kind of sure where it is. Whereas say if you come in for an interview with me and you're familiar with how I interview, you've probably got a fair sense of how that will go. You won't know every single thing, but you'd have a reasonable idea what to expect. Whereas who could possibly expect a question like, how much money do you have in dollars and cents, which was what Hamish Blake got asked.
I loved that question. Ruthless but amazing and yielded really, really interesting answers.
It was great. Yeah, I loved it too.
Thinking about then that sort of divergent thinkers approach to an interview and that curiosity and positivity that we saw, do we need more of that in media?
Well, I thought it was a fantastic reminder when you're interviewing somebody, especially somebody who's been interviewed a lot, like a politician or a celebrity or a sports person, to think really carefully about what you might be able to ask them that they haven't been asked a million times before. What are not the obvious questions, what might be things that build rapport. And so I thought it was a really useful reminder to do that, and also a useful reminder for journalists to approach things completely open-mindedly and to not go into things with an agenda. Because I just think the talent can kind of sense that. And I've found in my own career, you can pretty much ask somebody anything if you ask it with genuine curiosity. So you can, ask something even quite personal or offensive if you preface it by saying, look, I hope this question's not going to offend you, and you don't have to answer it, of course. But I just wondered, why did you steal that money? Or if you ask something in that kind of a manner, that's far more likely to elicit an engaged response than,
being on
why
the
did you steal the money? Yeah. So it was just a reminder of those things, like having that kind of open-mindedness and just going in with a spirit of curiosity is really good.
Of course, with the Assembly, we had a room of 15 autistic student journalists. That is not a reality that is reflected in most press conference rooms, in most newsrooms around the country. Do you think that this shows us that needs to change?
Yeah, I hope that it does lead not just to, employment for the people in the show, if they want it in media, but even just for them, that the confidence they got from that experience that they might be able to take into whatever they choose to do. I do think that we need to have a more open-minded approach to the kinds of people we employ in journalism, because otherwise there's just these whole, and not just in neurodivergence, in all sorts of things, there's this whole kind of series of blind spots that we have. If we just employ people who went to private schools and grew up in inner city Sydney or Melbourne, we're going to get a particular kind of people who are working in journalism. And so we need to kind of look further afield. And I think, with this show, what it demonstrated at the end of the day is, even if you strip aside the worthiness of doing a show with autistic people, it's a really entertaining show. It's just an entertaining show. There were autistic people on the crew as well. And so I think what it proved is you can make an entertaining piece of television, forget the kind of diversity goals, you can make entertaining television with a diverse group of people.
Do you think there is fear and hesitation from employers, from the whole spectrum of the production company to journalists and the experience? Are we too afraid to lean into those conversations?
I think there is a degree of that. And I noticed even when I was doing the publicity rounds for the show, one of the things that came up was language. So, for example, you would have noticed I've been saying autistic people. One of the interviewers who was talking to me, a high-profile interviewer, said, I was really worried about this because I wasn't sure if I should say people with autism or autistic people. The advice from Aspect was autistic people. But that's the kind of thing that makes people feel worried about, well, should I do an interview about this or just avoid it? Because if I misspeak, then I could be at the centre of some kind of big controversy and then be in trouble and everything could fall apart. And so I think sometimes people fear I might make a mistake here. I might say the wrong thing. I might do the wrong thing, and then I'll be, under attack. And so I think there's two ways we can look at that. One is, I think we all just need to kind of educate ourselves a bit better about things. But the other thing too is to make sure when people are well-intentioned and they do make mistakes that it doesn't turn into, catastrophe. So there has to be kind of, I think, just general understanding and compassion, at all ends. But I do think there's a little bit of fear.
Did you experience that yourself in the room with the journos? You were mentoring them, working on their questions. When you went into it initially for the first episode, did you have a little bit of that hesitation in your own self?
Not at the point at which I went in to shoot the show, but when I was approached about doing it, I had exactly those thoughts about, well, is it all downside risk for me? What if I set a foot wrong? Everyone will be looking to, kick me in the pants. But, like a lot of things in life, actually, when you're working with the people involved, it's completely awesome and fine. It's just the kind of fear, I guess, based around the kind of stuff we see on social media. You just think, oh, maybe I'll find myself the target of a whole lot of, people. So that thought did cross my mind, but then, the people involved on the show were just absolutely delightful.
What comes next for these 15 journos? Have any of them gone on to continue pursuing journalism, job offers?
So all 15 were offered a paid internship at the ABC if they wanted it, and everyone accepted it, which was lovely.
Wow.
So some of them are doing that at the moment. Some of them are yet to start. The thing that's going to be interesting is to see, say, for example, I went to university with, say, 30 people who were in my course at the time and did journalism. I think within about 2 years, only maybe 10 people were still in journalism, and today probably only 2 are still in journalism. So sometimes people dip a toe in media. They decide, oh, it's not actually for me. I don't like deadlines, or I don't like not knowing what I'm doing every day. So it'll be interesting to see of this group whether anyone's actually decides, I really would like to do this. One of the great things has been, while it's been on air, various contacts of mine have rung me to say, I think I could probably offer some work to that person.
Wow.
Yeah, based on the kind of interests that the different students showed. So that's actually been just fantastic to see, hopefully some opportunities come up for people. Because as I think Abby mentions in the show to the Prime Minister, it's been really hard for her to find work since she finished school. And so if we could kind of get to the other side of this and see some of them landing with some work that they want to do, I'd be so happy.
That would be amazing. Just the influence of the right people watching the right show at the right time really goes to that issue of representation and how powerful it can be.
Well, that's exactly right. And also just, I think, to encourage people, if you're listening to this, if you ever see something on TV and you think, oh, I could make a difference with that, to just pick up the phone and think who you know, or just drop them a line via their website or whatever. Because many times in my career, people have rung, like I remember once we had a story on 7:30 about a woman who had been caught in floods in northern New South Wales and left homeless. And I won't name the person, but a quite prominent, wealthy Australian businessman rang and he paid for her rent for a year while she and her kids got on her feet. Another time, Ben Mendelsohn, the Australian actor, he rang. We had this amazing story about this initiative where a mum of a teenager with special needs had organised this kind of dance, and it was for other people with special needs because she said it's hard for those kids to ever really go to an environment that's kind of going to be safe for them. And so she'd kind of organised this thing and paid for it out of her own pocket and so on. But they didn't have a lot of money to keep doing it as a regular thing. But we had footage from the event and the kids had such a great time. And then Ben Mendelsohn was watching the ABC on iView in LA, and then he got in touch to say, I'll pay for another one of those things. And so he just paid for them to have another one.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
It's so cool, yeah.
Go Ben Mendelsohn.
Another time we had this story, it was a domestic violence story about this poor woman who had been beaten by her partner and her teeth had been ruined. And she said in the story she didn't like to smile anymore because her mouth was so terrible. And this dentist in Adelaide rang and said, I'll fix that for free. It was like hours and hours, days, weeks, months of work.
So you just never know who's paying attention,
totally.
Who cares and what a difference they might be able to make.
And you can really, really make a big difference to somebody.
If there are employers watching the assembly thinking, gosh, I've been wrong about autistic people, or I want a more diverse workplace, but they don't know where to begin, or they might be feeling, oh, it's going to be too difficult. I don't know how to support an additional needs person or someone on the spectrum or someone who's neurodivergent. What have you learned about supporting people in that group?
So firstly, there's heaps of organisations you can turn to for advice on that. So one of them is called Employee for Ability. So you can just contact those organisations and say, look, I'd like to have more diversity in my workforce. Can you give me some information? There's plenty of information just on their websites. You can look at, say, a group like Aspect that I talked about. You can look at, say, the federal government. They have various resources on their websites and so on. And then I think also the other thing is to just look at your own employment practices and see, have you got things in place maybe that unfairly weed people out, where actually with the slightest adjustments maybe you could have a more diverse workforce. So say, for example, one of the students on our show was really badly bullied in high school to the degree that she's very scared of teenagers. And so it's hard for her to commute in peak hour because you're going to see school kids on the way to school and that freaks her out. So with her internship, her hours are after, so she doesn't have to get on the bus or whatever when she's likely to run into school kids. So just little things like that where you can maybe make some small adjustments that make it easier for somebody to...
A huge difference for someone else.
Yeah. And often also just... I saw Dylan Alcott once do a keynote somewhere. He's such a good public speaker. But he was basically saying also just ask the person who's working with you, like, how's it going for you? Is there anything we can do to make things a bit more comfortable for you? How are you managing with this? Again, people I think sometimes are maybe scared to have that conversation. But if you do it kind of in a well-intentioned way, hopefully, it can work for both parties.
I thought Adam Goodes was the real master at putting everyone at ease. I was so impressed by that episode.
Same here.
If anyone listening hasn't watched it and you will only watch one episode, I think that's the one I would wish you to watch because it really just sums it up so beautifully. He just engaged with them on such a beautiful level, and it really changed the way that I think about how you can engage with people. But just small things like remembering someone's name.
I noticed that too, yeah. He really remembered everybody's name and just paid full attention to every person when they were speaking to him. I had never met him before. I thought he was phenomenal. He was the most amazing
beautiful
person.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got this real sort of just... I mean, he's gigantic, like all those AFL players. He's like a big tree.
Yeah.
But he's got this real quiet, peaceful, kind of warm quality.
Stillness, yeah.
He makes you feel like you just want to lean forwards all the time to listen to what he's saying. He's just fantastic.
And you could see how special he made everyone feel.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, it was really touching.
He was incredible. But to be fair, all the others, I mean, it was funny, like Hamish Blake and Amanda Keller who were on it, they kind of came in and I felt like, look, I can really see why you two are such big stars because you're just so charismatic and hilarious and everyone loves you, and they were fantastic. And it was a wonderful experience.
I wanted to finish up by asking you, Leigh Sales, the master interviewer. You are regarded for good reason as one of Australia's most prominent interviewers. Did you think that you could learn anything about interviewing before this process? And what were your big takeaways that surprised you?
Do you know, interviewing is one of these weird skills where I think no matter how many times you've done it, there's still always something to learn because every person that you're talking to is different. And so there's no kind of set formula that you can always follow. There's tips you can apply, but it's always going to be different when you're in the environment. And so it's been something for me over the course of my career that I've never found ever interviewing people boring or staid because it's always different when you get into the moment. I think for me in that space, it was just it was more the reminder of things like, it's worth the effort to put in to think up original questions. It's worth the effort to take something down a different path. It's worth listening really closely to what the person's saying and really paying attention and engaging with them in that sense. But there were certain things the students did that I wouldn't do, and so I wouldn't get to the same responses they did. Like there was an interview where Savannah asked Amanda Keller, do you love your husband? Now, I, of course, would not phrase it like that.
Yeah.
But she got this most incredible answer from Amanda because Amanda's husband, Harley, has Parkinson's. And so it's very much in her mind how much she loves Harley. So actually wording the question like that elicited a really incredible answer from Amanda. So, there were certain things with the students that I just wouldn't get to myself because I'd never think to phrase things like that.
So season 2, are we getting it?
I'm hoping so. I mean, it's been very popular. It's one of those programs where you notice sometimes if you do something, if it's struck a chord, because when I'm out and about in the community, people stop me and talk to me.
Yeah.
And at the moment, every time I leave the house, somebody will say, excuse me, I just wanted to say I love the assembly. So it's really sort of struck a chord.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping the ABC will do a second season. The funny thing is I can't imagine doing it now with a different group of people.
Yeah.
Because I just love all of them so much. And it was one of those rare experiences in a work life where it just everyone clicked. The chemistry with everyone was great. We all love each other. I can't imagine doing it with a different group.
I can't imagine it either because now we've got these personalities and everyone's so distinct in their interview style.
Yeah.
Sort of waiting for it in the interview. It made it so dynamic because you know, okay, that guy's going to ask something really intense, or I love her, she's going to ask something really silly and funny.
Yeah, exactly. And you get very invested in them, particularly when, as the season unfolds, you see little snippets of people's backstories and you know, what their childhood was like, what their family's like. And so then you sort of, you know, and you can imagine how much more so when you're working with them all the time, like the level of like rooting for them in the moment to like, oh, come on, Evie, you can get it out. They're just a fantastic group of people. It was just brilliant.
Such a beautiful viewing experience. I highly recommend that everyone check it out. It's if you're feeling a little bit down on yourself and you need a reminder that being different is one of the best things you can be, check out The Assembly on ABC iView. We will pop a link in the show notes. Leigh Sales, thank you so much for coming on the Daily Aus podcast.
No, thank you so much for having me.
That's all we have time for today, but thank you for listening to today's episode of The Daily Aus. Tomorrow we'll be back with good news, but in the meantime, if you want to share the love, feel free to hit subscribe or follow on whatever platform you are listening or watching us on. We'll chat to you tomorrow, but have a great day.